Another banging tune to start us out on
Is your
this week's
iPod, or?
CPL. Yeah, I did. I think this is my Zune from 2007. Um, you're back on the CPL Newsroom, presented by Volkswagen. Week 3 of the Canadian Premier League in the books. I'm Charlie O'Connor-Clarke. That's Mitchell Tierney. And as always, we're going to run through all of the action that was across the league. Just a quick rundown of the scores in week 3, because we had some pretty interesting ones. Friday night, you and I were both there. York United 3, Vancouver FC 0. Saturday, we had a doubleheader. Halifax Wanderers 1, Atlético Ottawa 3, followed by a game again we were both at, Forge 2, Valour 1. And then finally, last night, Sunday night, closing out the evening, or the weekend, not necessarily with a bang, was Cavalry and Pacific playing to a 0-0 draw in Cavalry's league home opener after they got things started in the Canadian Championship at home midweek, beating Vancouver. Mitchell, I think we're going to start at the end of the weekend this time and work backwards in chronological order.
Oh, that is way too confusing for me.
I pulled this one on you very late, so I'm apologizing if you end up accidentally talking about Halifax or something. But Cavalry 0, Pacific 0. Cavalry 20 shots to Pacific 7, but arguably the biggest chance of the game comes right at the end when Marco Carducci has to make a massive save to bail out Cavalry. Mitchell, what did you think of both of these teams, and did you think that either of them really deserved to go home with more than a point?
Probably Cavalry. I mean, let's pull up one stat line alone. If I were to tell you Ali Musi had 7 shot attempts, 15 touches in the box, and 4 chances created, I think it's a pretty big outlier that he's not going to create at least one goal for the 2023 Players Player of the Year. Pacific certainly defended those chances pretty well, and there is a reason why some of those didn't end up, but I think it's more at the end of the day about the attacking execution for Cavalry than them not being able to create chances. And again, give Pacific credit for their defensive side of things. But even if Rian Moore had slipped that ball past Carducci at the end of the game, it would have really been a smash and grab for 3 points. But at the end of the day, Cavalry still trying to find that offensive rhythm, and that's a big story for them.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I think the thing that, we said there's 20 shots for Cavalry here and 3 of them are on target. Like, that's not good. That's not good. 10 of those 20 were from outside of the box, right? So it kind of suggests that it's a bit of a throwing anything at the wall to see what sticks in that sort of situation where you're maybe not getting into the most dangerous areas that you'd want to be. So at that point, you're just taking shots and trying to test obviously a goalkeeper in Sean Melvin who hasn't played yet this year. Maybe you're trying to test him, but obviously only actually put it on target 3 times. But we talked about Cavalry's maybe lack of execution in the final third. I think maybe we should go back and see what their coach Tommy Wheeldon Jr. had to say about this, because the start to the regular season hasn't necessarily been particularly smooth for them, but it also took them a while to get their first win last year, and we all know how that ended. So maybe before we go deeper on Cavalry, let's go back to Spruce Meadows and hear from Tommy Wheeldon Jr.
It was 2 points dropped, in my opinion. I think the manner in which we played first half, coming in at 0-0, disappointing, but we stuck to the tactics. The first 10-15 minutes, we were at them again. And maybe we ran out of steam. Maybe the changes coming in weren't, what we needed at that time. But look, we played 3 games in a week, so you have to make them. We found a way to win on Tuesday. But if you don't score, you don't win games here.
If you don't score, you don't win games. Speaking of which, Pacific didn't score either, Mitchell. What did you think of them? Obviously, the game changes quite a bit when they do bring Ayman Salouf in, which is also not an unfamiliar sight after last year in a CPL, right?
No, and I think most impressive about Pacific is the defensive base they've built up so far. I mean, they're the only club in the CPL who hasn't allowed a goal so far this season, and that's certainly not by accident. I mean, they've had good goalkeeping performances, but I think Thomas Meyer-Jaguar has taken the next level this year with Didish leaving, and I think Ali Endom's actually just a better partner for him in terms of how they complement each other. Endom's ability to play out of the back and kind of get them out of pressure in tight situations has really boded well and made sure even if they are more defensively set up, they aren't constantly under pressure, and those balls, like you said, aren't in dangerous areas for significant amounts of time. So you really like that. And then, like you said, one thing they've been getting is their attackers, like Rion Moore. This guy's been getting like under 20 touches a game, but first game he wins a penalty, second game he sets up their opening goal, in this third game, he really should have won it. So you like to see what he's been able to do with limited time on the ball, and in the Pacific system, this year, that's important. I do think they're going to want to get back more to that Pacific DNA of holding onto the ball a little bit more, of being the aggressors and instigators. But as you're adjusting to a team with a lot of new players in important positions, to have that defensive foundation first is what's going to bring them success, and is going to bring them success away from home, importantly as well, which is something that hasn't always been the case in past years.
Absolutely. Well, moving on from this game, and Cavalry have the whole week at home. They stay in Calgary, and then they play on Friday night against Vancouver at Atco Field. Pacific, meanwhile, they're headed home for their first game in a Canadian Championship. They're hosting TSS Rovers in a rematch from last year's, I want to say, quarterfinal. That stage of the competition was. Yeah, I can see you trying to check it in your head as well, but I'm pretty sure. But obviously a Rovers team that is very, very motivated for another crack at Pacific, and Pacific, who are very motivated to make another Canadian Championship run after going to the semifinals last year. Anyway, from Calgary, let's head to Saturday night in Hamilton at Tim Hortons Field. Again, Mitch, you and I were both there, as Forge did what Forge have done so many times. Valour played quite well in this game, very bravely. They loved sending so many crosses into the, I think it was 26, which I think is like a top 10 amount of crosses from a team in a game in CPL history. I think it was 7th. But yeah, Forge, again, they find a way. Good teams always find a way to win. And that's exactly what happened here with Forge, with Amadou Kone coming on late, winning the ball on the right side, driving into the box, and then Noah Jensen, a fellow substitute, smashes it in with a deflection on the way through, and then, ripping the shirt off in celebration, as one does, obviously. But, Mitch, how many times have Forge done this, where they're not necessarily at their best? Maybe they concede a goal in a difficult time, but by the end of the game, they've scored a late goal and they've taken all 3 points.
Yeah, I mean, that's the difference between a championship side and the contenders, is your ability to consistently do that. And it's the second time at home this season where they've done exactly that. They've maybe haven't put together the most consistent 90 minutes, but they have those difference makers that can pop up in the key moments and change games. And this year, really, that's been Tristan Borges, who has been unbelievable to start this Canadian Premier League season. Stat from Alex Saunders from our soccer ops department. Yeah, this is the most productive start to a season through 3 weeks in CPL history, with 5 goal contributions. Obviously, the 2 goals and the 3 assists that Borges has put in so far. So it's been incredible to see him back to his best, playing more of a central role, but also, can pop up on either side. So he's just so difficult to defend against right now. And again, Daniel Para, a player who towards the end of that match, in a similar way, was kind of playing a little bit free at the back and tucking inside so he could distribute, wins a penalty that goes unconverted, or at least sets up the play for the penalty that goes unconverted, and then sets up Borges. Again, we're talking about real difference makers in the Canadian Premier League, and on a day where you're not at your best and where Valour frustrate you for most of the 90 minutes, like, having players like that is the difference between, again, 0 points, 1 point, and then actually getting 3 points.
Yeah, absolutely. And I asked rhetorically how many times Forge have done this. I actually have it in the last 13 months. So since the start of last season, they've done it 7 times when they've won a game with a goal after the 75th minute.
Yeah, including
the CPL final, including their first 2 home games of this year, including 4 regular season games last year. That's crazy. That's crazy. You cannot count this team out. You're right to mention Tristan Borges, who has probably been the best player. I mean, pretty objectively been the best player in the league for the first 3 weeks. Daniel Parra was my man of the match here. And it's crazy that he's, forced to do this all the time. A guy comes in, he's a little bit unknown. He fits in perfectly immediately. They played those CONCACAF games with Malik Owolabi-Belawu at left back, and he was great there. And I think a lot of us assumed that was going to be the solution for them at left back this year. It turns out they found another guy who is incredible as an attacking fullback, and Malik can go back to his more comfortable center back position where he's also really, really good. So again, it must be frustrating to be other teams and seeing Forge continue to be this strong. I do want to talk about Valour though, because they deserve a lot of praise. But before we do that, we will go back to Tim Hortons Field one last time because Christian Jack caught up with the goal scorer, Noah Jensen. So I think we should hear from him.
Christian Jack alongside Noah Jensen. Post-game reaction brought to you by Allstate. Right near the goal, you just won it for your team here in Hamilton. How you feeling?
It's a fantastic feeling. It's always nice to score the winner, especially at home in front of these great fans. It's been a great start to the season for us, and let's keep that rolling into Wednesday. So.
How will you remember the goal? Noah, take us through it.
I think I'll remember the celebration a little bit more than the goal, but it was a special moment, especially for Amadou. He did well to get the assist. It's a big moment for him, such a young player. But just a good moment for our team, to win 3 points at the end like that is good for the morale of the group.
It seems like it's always the mentality at Forge is that you're never done, right? Did it even feel across your mind as you come on that you could still win it?
Yeah, and we went 1-0 up, and then we conceded quite soon after, but we always knew we have a goal in us. I think that's our mentality every single game, and today it was me, but in the future it will be someone else. So.
Yeah, it certainly was you. You're the hero, but there were other heroes. What about your goalkeeper? Christopher Kalongo makes not 1, 2, but 3 brilliant saves.
Yeah, he's been brilliant. Yeah, he's one of my closest friends in the group. I'm so proud of him, the way he stepped into his role this year, and there's bigger things ahead for him, for sure.
Final one for you. This is the first time in club history, and they're running out of firsts, by the way, because you've done a lot. But the first time in club history you've won the first 3 games in the season. What does that say to the form that you're in at the moment?
Yeah, it's been good. Obviously, we had a tough off-season, tough start to the season, but it's just great to get 3 wins on the bounce, and it's momentum that we can continue on going forward.
And I know the Canadian Championship is huge for your team, right? Play midweek against York.
Yeah, I know. It's a must-win game, as they all are, but it gives us an opportunity to play 2 big games against Montreal, so that's what we have our eyes set on.
Hero of the day, Noah Jensen. Congrats. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Noah Jensen, the hero of the day. That was very right to shout out Chris Kalongo as well, who made 6 saves in this game. A clean sheet last week against York, and comes in and does a very good job. But he had to do a very good job because Valour were very dangerous, weren't they, Mitchell? They looked very deliberate in the way that they wanted to attack. It was pretty clear that they wanted to, hit crosses in from Temi Antonoglu and Zach Secunda. And, some of them found their marks. Some of them found dangerous areas. And eventually Jordan Faria does bring one down, or Antonoglu brings one down and send it to Faria, and he scores. But, what did you like, Mitch, about the way that Valour approached this game? Because they've always been pretty good at Tim Hortons Field.
Yeah, I mean, the league's going to find out pretty soon that you absolutely cannot stand off Temi Antonoglu in crossing positions. Unfortunately, pretty much anywhere down that left flank seems to be a crossing position for him. So that's going to be a challenge for teams all year. And I like that they've set up in a way that really allows him to do that. And they have players now that are getting committed into the box. What I really liked was the approach. I mean, they obviously score that goal through Jordan Faria, and a lot of teams would have closed up shop then and there and just stopped maybe trying to go forward as much. They really took it to Forge, and honestly, they were unlucky, I think, a little bit. There was a stretch of like you said, 3 or 4 Chris Kalongo saves or near misses combined in a couple minutes where they really could have won this game. And honestly, when you're a team like Valour or any team in the Canadian Premier League, and you can win on any day, maybe it's 1 point lost this time, but sometimes it's going to be 3 points gained from an approach like that. And I really admired the bravery of Valour to really go for it. In a game again where for most of the 90 minutes they were quite solid, and we've only really seen maybe a good half from them so far. So we're talking about improvement each week. I think they're 3 points out of the playoffs right now, which obviously is, early in the season to talk about that, but it shows, if they can keep improving and start picking up results, they're not falling behind right now, really. Again, it was a big step forward, and could be a confidence boost for them going into the big Canadian Championship game on Wednesday.
Yeah, absolutely. They head to Ottawa to play twice in a row because they're against them in the Cup on Wednesday, and then against them again at TD Place on Saturday in the league. But yeah, Valour, they do always seem to play Forge very, very hard. Probably a little bit unfortunate not to come out of this game with anything, but I think generally, more positive signs from Valour after, again, 2 decent first halves in the first 2 games of the year. Maybe this is a little bit closer to a 90-minute performance, but still kind of missing that final ball at times where eventually those crosses will find the back of the net. But I do think that Forge also did quite well defending against them, and when they didn't, then Chris Kalunga was there more often than not. Anyway, moving on from Tim Hortons Field, we had a wild one in Halifax in their home opener where, the score is 3-1 for Atlético Ottawa. So, spoiling the kitchen party in the first game of the year at the Wanderers grounds. But this is a disappointing one for Halifax. Lorenzo Caligari sent off, I think 20 minutes into this game. He gets his boot high up on Manny Aparicio's chest. It's one of those where, the referee looked like they had a really, really good angle on it. And we don't unfortunately have a camera angle from that side, but it does look like the boot comes up and his studs are quite exposed. So I think in that case, referee doesn't have a lot of choice, even if it's not intentional. And Caligari maybe obviously didn't mean to put his cleats directly into Manny's chest. But, I do understand that Halifax have lodged an appeal to see if they can get his automatic 2-game suspension reduced in any way, but we will see what happens with that, and we'll update you guys as we learn. But anyway, Mitchell, let's start with Halifax because they scored the first goal of the season. Mm-hmm. That's good. And it was a really good goal at the end of the game, but it was already 3-0 when they did that. And Riley Ferrazzo scores, again, quite a nice goal on that great ball from Jeremy Gagnon-Laparé. But going down a man, conceding 3, still looking for their first point of the season, Mitchell. This is, a disappointment again for Halifax, right?
Yeah, it's a disappointment. I would take more pros maybe than you would expect out of a game where you get a red card in the 20th minute. I actually thought that, even with a man down, they're actually pretty proactive in attack. They went at Ottawa a lot. I like that they went and got that late goal to kind of break that narrative. And they kept pushing for that goal because, if they come out of this scoreless and winless, there's 2 storylines that we can talk about next week. Now we're only down to the winless one. So at least they've checked that box. And I do think that is critically important. But yeah, at the same time, it's probably the worst player to lose, isn't it? That's the engine of their team. And, they'll be missing him for 2 more matches if that appeal doesn't go through. And, this reminded me a lot of last year. I think it was their second home match where they play York United and Lorenzo Caligari suspended for that one and they get beat 3-0. Kind of a similar match. So that just shows how important this player is to that team. Again, they were similar to Cavalry. They had a slow start last season. It's been a bit slow to start this year. The worst, I think Patrice Geyser said it after the match. It's the 18-yard boxes that are the concern right now, which in some ways is like 2 parts of the game, but they're 2 pretty big parts of the game. So there are concerns at both ends of the field, which isn't ideal. I think you'd rather be like Cavalry, where really the concern is more the attacking side and you can't click there. The fact that they're kind of fighting a battle on 2 fronts right now is probably the most not ideal part of this start.
Yeah, absolutely. And some changes from Halifax to the lineup for this game as well. They kind of moved to more of a back 4. Kale Lockery goes to the bench. Christian Valesky goes to the bench. But again, I think still looking for, I guess, that first one that might take some of the weight off their shoulders. And before we chat about Atlético Ottawa, let's just get a bit of a temperature check, from their coach, Patrice Geyser, back at the Wanderers grounds.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, for me, it doesn't matter on Thursday if we play Forge, Calgary, League One team. It's a game that, like you said, we got to rebound, be ready to go. There are no excuses. Like I just said it, and I said it to the guys. No one's perfect. but we are making some mistakes. Even with a red card, I still felt we could have minimized some mistakes, right? But no problem. Get back to work, fix it, be ready to go on Thursday.
Fix it, be ready to go on Thursday. Patrice, guys are expecting a response on Thursday in that Canadian Championship game against CS Saint Laurent. Really a must win for them.
Mm-hmm.
When you play a League One club in Canadian Championship, especially with the prospect of a two-legged tie with Toronto FC beckoning, if you win that, you have to win that game. And I think maybe if they can not just win it, but win it convincingly, that could do a lot for Halifax and help them maybe find their swagger a little bit, because I think that's going to be a team that needs some confidence, because if they don't, then things can go off the rails. Atlético Ottawa, though, remain undefeated, 2 wins and a draw in this Canadian Premier League season. Mitchell, what did you think of them? Because again, very effective and sharp in the attacking third.
Yeah, agreed. I think we saw a match earlier this week in the Canadian Championship where a side gets a red card and the other side doesn't really take advantage. In fact, they get scored on. Ottawa took advantage of the extra spaces that were afforded to them based on this, based on there being less numbers in the middle of the park. Love the double pivot with Sissoko and Manny Aparicio, who kind of controlled things through there. And yeah, they were just clinical. They did a really good job of finding those open spaces. Often it was Valour kind of stretching the lines and getting him behind it in transition, finding those moments. Obviously he gets off the mark, which is important for them, I think, this season, to have him going early. And we see once again one of the best impact players in the year, and I think they've found a better way of getting Ollie Bassett more central and having him create, which is going to be critical as well. He was a little isolated through the first few matches of the season, and we know obviously the silverware speaks for itself, what this man can do when you put him in positions to succeed. So he remains a critical piece of that team. And you like what you've seen from them through 3 weeks. Again, to have picked up 3 results already at 7 points, I think is a great return for a team, again, still just getting started.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ollie Bassett, you're very right to point out 4 chances created in this game. I think he was outstanding. Valour guy had 7 shots in the game. That is a lot. That is a lot. Like, usually you're having a great game if you have 3 or 4. 7 is a lot. But yeah, a lot to like from the individual performances in Ottawa, as these guys do continue to click and put it together. And obviously, we know why there's so much excitement around this team. And I think we're starting to see it manifest. Another thing is Matteo de Brienne playing up on the wing with Maxime Tissot fit enough to come and play 90 minutes at left back. And Tissot was brilliant there, I think. I think he won 11 of 15 duels, which, again, implies that he was a busy man, but he was an effective one in this game. So yeah, a lot to like for Ottawa as well. As we mentioned earlier, 2 games against Valour at home within the next 7 days. One of them being in the cup, obviously, and they will be quite desperate to win that cup game, because this club has not really had a Canadian Championship run in its history. So again, that would be one they're definitely circling on the calendar. Anyway, to our final match. Well, our final match of the show, our first match of the weekend, was at York Lions Stadium on Friday night under the lights. It was kind of cold, to be honest. I was outside for most of it. But anyway, York United coming in looking for their first points of the year. They play a Vancouver team that had not yet dropped points. And they go to town. They win 3-0. Really, really getting the job done in the second half, especially. Mitch, from your vantage point, what do you think was so effective from the way that York United played?
Yeah, I think tactically Martin Nash just got this brilliantly right. I mean, they set up in a 4-4-2, which, for most of the game didn't really lead to much offensively, but it really stopped Vancouver from, being able to break their very solid lines of 4. And then, when you're playing a Vancouver side who played midweek, short rest, quick travel, you can kind of take advantage of them late. And that's exactly what they did. The game gets a little stretched, and York do brilliantly well. I mean, Brian Wright is probably the best game we've seen from him in a York United shirt 2 goals, 1 assist. He was fantastic. The new guys coming in completely changed how their backline looks, and Frank Stirring and the range of passing he can have. Juan Cordova was excellent. Him and Max Ferrari. If you want to talk about combos down the flanks, those two on the right were fantastic. So just so much to like for a York United team that really, really needed a result like this after, some good moments. Obviously, in the nation's capital could have maybe won week 1, but the response after being beaten by the same scoreline by Forge last week was excellent.
Yeah, I mean, it does a lot for the goal differential, doesn't it? But yeah, there's something quite satisfying about looking at the Opta formation graphic and seeing 2 teams set up to play proper 4-4-2 football.
That's proper football, isn't it?
that is Yorkshire football right here. I love this. And I think so clever from Martin Nash. We'd seen what Vancouver had done with their banks of 4 and with Moses Dyer and Alejandro Diaz playing very close together in their first 2 games. York's 4-4-2 a little bit different in practice. I think both Ricci and Wright stretching the pitch a little bit more, not necessarily playing right off each other's shoulders in the same way, but give it a little bit of freedom to kind of command 2 sides of the pitch. But I do really, really think it worked. For me, though, and I know Brian Wright scored 2 goals and had an outstanding game. Juan Cordova was maybe one of the biggest stories of this game. For me, he's rightfully so. I mean, as is Wright, but Cordova is also in the team of the week for week 3. And, just to see the quality he brings, he's got so much experience playing down in South America. He's just such an entertaining player to watch. He's not a huge guy. I think we can tell, but the way that he's so clever on the ball, he's so calm. He can take on defenders. He can really, really get high up the pitch. And again, you mentioned his combination with Max Ferrari, who is very comfortable dropping in behind him to play as that fullback if necessary. It seems like that is the start of a very, very interesting and effective relationship for York. But this is a game that they needed to win very badly after losing those first 2. Do you have something to say?
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to say, because we were talking about proper football. One moment that basically everyone I talked to on York United spoke about was Elijah Adekubi absolutely goes through Vasco Fry.
Yeah.
I don't know, like 6 minutes into the game, and they haven't done that enough. They haven't set the tone at home. They haven't been difficult to play enough at home. And that's a moment where, that's the response you're looking for early in the game. Again, clean tackle, not even a foul. That just really set the standard for the rest of the game for York. So I just wanted to give Elijah Adekubi a shout out, because, it's moments like that can change games and, don't get talked about the same way, like you said, Cordova and Wright do for their offensive prowess.
Yeah, it did set a tone. And then moments later, Vasco Fry comes in with a similar challenge that is probably a little bit more reckless. And, again, you could see that it had bothered and maybe shaken Vancouver a little bit. But anyway, before we do move on to Vancouver and discuss if there's much to be worried about, let's just close the book on York United here and go back and hear a much happier version of their head coach, Martin Nash.
I just think that our compete level was where it needed to be. We ran and worked last week, but I didn't think we competed. And we competed from the first minute. I think Elijah's tackle was a great tackle in the middle of the park. I think set the tone, and the rest of the guys stepped up and we responded. I thought we created a lot more opportunities than them. I know they're a tired team coming in, but I was real pleased with the performance, the energy, the effort, all the way to the end.
Effort all the way to the end. Yeah, it's always nice if you're a manager to see your team kind of press their advantage, not be happy with 1 or 2 up. They continue to play, continue to want to attack, and then Brian Wright scores that second goal, which could be so important for him confidence-wise in the 93rd minute, and a well-deserved man of the match nod for him. Vancouver FC, won those first 2 home games. Quite disappointed not to beat Cavalry in the Canadian Championship on Tuesday, especially after going up a man. But, not at their best in this game, I think we'd say. Mitchell, was this game more of a case of York United just finding their form and carving through them, or was there something a little bit off in Vancouver?
I think Vancouver still needs to figure out what A, their identity is, but B, how they can get results away from home. I think that's the biggest thing. We're early into the season, so we'll see how it shapes out, but it's looking like home teams are a little bit better this year, and like there is going to be that home advantage. So away might be where you can kind of make inroads. And obviously, 2 games at home, they look solid, they win. 2 games on the road, maybe just not as much confidence going forward. They didn't score in either game. They didn't really challenge York United offensively nearly enough. I think there's maybe one Moses Dyer open header that he would have liked back, but I think Afshin Ghabi spoke after the game, but just maybe not being creative enough. So that's a bit of a concern. But again, I don't think if you're Vancouver, I don't think you want to make too much of this result. You just want to move on from this week kind of as a whole and go back to playing the football that got you, 6 points already this season, because I think there's more to like than to be concerned by the way Vancouver started this season.
Yeah, of course. And again, they were a team that had trouble playing away from home last year, and that's something that I think they're aware of and working on trying to find those ways. Luckily for them, I suppose they get to go back to Calgary this Friday and get another crack at that team. After obviously losing there in the cup last week, I think they'll be quite pleased to get that chance and maybe prove that they can get results on the road. But again, a frustrating one for Vancouver here. 67 entries into the final third, which is well more than York, but 2 shots on target, 5 shots in the box. You mentioned maybe not quite having enough creativity in those areas, and I think that probably is right on that. A couple changes in the lineup as well, though, for them, right? Like the entire right side of the lineup is changed, with James Cameron coming in for Caden Chung and TJ Tahid coming in just above him on the wing. And I think it was pretty clear that was 2 very young players that haven't played a lot of minutes this season yet. So I think, again, maybe not too much to be concerned about there if you're Vancouver, but
both were off at the half as well.
Exactly. It was quite clear that both those players will need to be maybe worked in a little bit more to get up to the level that especially Cameron was for much of the second half of last season. Anyway, that is our quartet of Canadian Premier League games in week 3. Let's just take a quick look at where things stand at this point, because now that we've got 3 weeks in, it's not just, these teams won, so they're the top 4 anymore. We have a little bit of separation. Forge, obviously the sole remaining perfect team in the league with 9 points. Halifax and Valour at the bottom, both waiting for their first point. And in between, there is quite a lot of logjam. Ottawa Pacific tied for second on 7 points, then Vancouver, then York, and then Cavalry with 2 in 6th place. I don't know why I jumped around the table in that strange order.
My brain
I'm sure
is
that
swimming right now.
I'm sure that was an absolute nightmare to hear if you're listening on the podcast. So for that, I am sorry, but you know what? You can go to campl.ca/standings and you can see them for yourself, because I don't want to run through them again. Anyway, let's see the schedule for next week. Obviously, before we have all of these lovely Canadian Premier League games, we do have some Canadian Championship, as I mentioned, Atlético Ottawa and Valour on Wednesday, May 1st, at the same time as Forge FC hosting York United at Tim Hortons Field. Both of those on Wednesday at 7 Eastern. Pacific hosting TSS Rovers later that night at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. And then on Thursday, the final game of this preliminary round is Halifax hosting CS Saint-Laurent at the Wanderers grounds. And then on the weekend, it is back into CPL action. Cavalry FC, Vancouver FC on Friday, May 3rd, 7 Mountain Time, 6 Pacific, 9 Eastern, I suppose. Pacific then hosting York on Saturday at 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern. Atlético Ottawa and Valour FC on Sunday, I believe that is. Yep. 2 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock if you are in Winnipeg. And then finally on Tuesday, May 7th, it looks like we got Forge FC hosting Halifax in the school day game at 11 a.m. Eastern time on a Tuesday, which should be quite fun. I believe we're all going to be there from the CPL. So, maybe we'll see some.
I got a PD day.
Yeah, exactly. I got a note from my teacher. They said I can go. But that should be a fun one. Anyway, we've I think, talked for long enough, and I think we could stand to hear a different voice and some different opinions. So, as we are always going to do this year, we have some stoppage time with our producer, Benedict Rhodes, who I will invite now onto the show to make me stop talking and ask us some questions from our lovely listeners.
Yeah, some good ones this week. Starting with Dimitri, our friend from OneSoccer, also known as LG Zara on Twitter, who asks, after 3 matches, who has been a surprising player this season? I guess you could spin that either positively or negatively, but who's been the most surprising player in the CPL this year?
Can I go first?
You can absolutely go first.
I'll give you some time to think. I'm going to say Chris Twardek. I don't think he was a name among those Atlético Ottawa names coming in. I don't think we expected him to stand out as much, and I don't think we expected him to be the answer at right back either for this Ottawa team, which was maybe their biggest question coming into the season. So he's been fantastic. Needs to figure out the officiating a little bit because he's got a suspension looming if he keeps picking up cards the way he has been. But overall, I think Twardek's been real impressive so far.
I think I'll also go with a fullback. I'm going to say Daniel Parra in Hamilton, who, I know we've already talked about in this show, but just to be able to come in to a new team from Mexico, start immediately, and be delivering man of the match performances in your 3rd week, that's enough for me to be surprised and very impressed.
Next up, after 3 games and 3 clean sheets for Pacific FC, Sly on Twitter asks, are they that good defensively and in goal, or is it just the beginning of the season and teams have not adjusted yet?
I mean, they're going to concede goals at some point. Yeah, I think it is. I think it is both. Like, they're going to concede goals at some point. I think there's a lot to be impressed about. But again, we kind of talked about it. Like, Cavalry score in that game more often than not. So there's still work to be done. It is early. But yeah, no, it's a good start. It's a good foundation, we'll say.
I agree.
Third one is Kingston to CPL. I wonder if they want an expansion team. Asks, if you could take one player within the league and put them on one of the 2 winless teams, that being Halifax and Valour, who would it be and why? So maybe each of you take one. Maybe Mitchell, start with Halifax. Who would you take from one of the other 6 teams to put on Halifax?
Oh, darn it. I wanted Valour because I had a good answer for that. But I'll
put Valour then. We'll put the pressure on Charlie to go with Halifax.
I'm doing Halifax?
I
had a funny one for Valour.
Let's go.
Okay.
How about we both do both then?
Okay.
You know what kind of player? You know what kind of player Valour could probably use right now?
Who?
Moses Dyer.
True.
I think both. I think for both teams, I'd go with a striker. I think that's one of the biggest problems in Winnipeg and Halifax right now is they need somebody who's going to be that clinical finisher, able to just pop up in the right areas in the box and not really think twice to smash it in the net. And I think that's maybe the player. Maybe it's Diaz. Maybe it's Diaz instead. But he might fit a little bit better in the Halifax system, maybe. But either way, I think both those teams, it would be a center forward for me.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go the other end of the pitch for Valour. I'd go with Amir Didic for Valour. Just having him in the center of that back line, and also he's getting on the end of at least 2 to 3 of those Temi crosses and scoring those. And then sure, let's go.
Are you playing him a striker?
Forge. Oh yeah, of course. No, he's
okay.
No, set pieces.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Tristan Borges for Halifax. I mean, again, can create chances, can score chances. If they had someone like that, someone in that form to start the season, I think it would look a whole lot different on the East Coast right now.
And last one comes from Alex on Twitter, who asks, Forge were able to make a 6th substitution because of Valour's sub of Frank Factionary was a head injury substitution, but Valour only ended up making 4 subs over 3 windows. Could Valour have opted not to use a head injury substitution, which in the end helped Forge, who have a deeper bench than them? So I reached out to Alex Saunders, who works for our soccer ops department. We've got 2 shout-outs on the show, so shout out to Alex again.
Big day for Alex.
Big day for Alex. And Alex Saunders said that supposedly the club could have elected to use a normal substitution. However, they chose to use a head injury substitution. So in a future event, the club does actually have that choice if they do have remaining substitutions left to use. So maybe some slight mismanagement from Phil DeSantos in the end. I know the 6th sub for Forge didn't end up being consequential. It was a 93rd minute sub for Kadeem Kane for Tristan Borges, but
Right.
no, in the future, something definitely to consider for these teams.
Yeah, it's a tricky part of the role. I guess Valour didn't technically empty their bench. They still had Jordan Haynes there, and I suppose if maybe Phil DeSantis wanted to have the opportunity or at least the capability to bring him on into the game if he wanted to, but yeah, certainly Forge I suppose spotted this area they could take advantage of and did so. If they're offered a sixth substitution, a team with that deep a bench is going to use it. So, good to know, and nice to clarify that. So thank you, Alex.
This just sounds like more press box math for me going forward this season, trying to figure this out.
Yeah, man. Anyway, Benny, is that it for the mailbag?
Sure is. We'll do it again next week. Send in your questions to us on social media, and we'll get to them every week on the show.
Yes, absolutely. Make sure that you send in anything that you would like to hear these two dummies talking about, ideally related to the Canadian Premier League, but honestly, we'll take them. We'll take pretty much anything. So anyway, we thank you very, very much for sticking with us through 3 weeks of the Canadian Premier League. We hope that you stick around and you watch the Canadian Championship games this week, the CPL games on the weekend, and then us again next week. I'm not quite sure yet if we're going to do our show on Monday or maybe Tuesday afternoon after the Halifax game in Forge, but we will try to let all you lovely people know as soon as we can. But until then, thank you very, very much for watching, and goodbye.
And for Aparicio, totally on Marco. Brilliant finish from